Welcome to the Midnight Codex, where forgotten truths breathe and shadows tell their tale. Tonight, don't blink and don't look behind you.
I shouldn't have answered the phone. The screen lit up with an unknown number, and an uneasy feeling twisted in my stomach. Every fiber of my being told me not to pick it up, to ignore the call. But I did anyway. Why? I can't say for sure. Maybe it was the restlessness gnawing at me, or just the loneliness of a Thursday afternoon spent in the dim light of my office. I'd been buried in historical texts all week, and the sudden break in monotony felt like something I couldn't pass up. "Lucas Moore," the voice rasped, low and strained, "we have something you need to see, something that will change everything." I froze. The voice sounded unfamiliar, rough, yet oddly familiar. It sent a cold shiver up my spine. Before I could speak, the line went dead, and the phone felt like it was burning in my hand. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The dead silence in my office pressed in on me, the weight of it almost suffocating. I couldn't even remember how I'd gotten here. It had been years since my wife's passing, and I'd spent most of that time locked away in the dusty corners of ancient libraries, drowning myself in manuscripts and artifacts. I had closed myself off from the world, focusing on history, on the dead. But this felt different. A name flashed in my mind, but it was like a distant echo, something I couldn't quite reach. It was a name I should have recognized, yet it was slipping through my fingers. Why would someone call me, someone I didn't know, and say such cryptic words? My instincts screamed that it wasn't just a casual message. I should have dropped the phone. I should have dismissed it. But instead, I set the phone down and immediately went back to my desk. My mind was racing, trying to shake off the feeling that had settled like ice in my veins. I tried to focus on my work, but the words of that phone call kept echoing in my mind. The next day, the letter arrived. It was simple, an unmarked envelope with the Vatican seal pressed into the wax. No return address, nothing on the outside to give me a hint about its sender. I opened it carefully, my fingers still trembling slightly. Inside was a single line of text. "Meet us at St. Peter's tonight. We have a job for you. Do not ignore this." That was it. No explanations, no signature, no further details. It was exactly what I had feared. Another sign, another mysterious message that would pull me deeper into a world I thought I had left behind. And yet, some part of me felt compelled to go. Part of me knew I had to. So I did. I told myself it was because of the work I'd been doing, researching ancient texts and forbidden relics for the Vatican. But the truth was, it wasn't just the work. I was being drawn to something darker, and it felt like I had no choice but to follow. That night, the Vatican was eerily quiet, the air heavy with secrets. I stood at the base of the Grand St. Peter's Basilica, watching the Eoli shadows stretch beneath the towering columns. It felt wrong somehow, too still, too silent. The weight of the centuries seemed to hang over the place, like the city itself was holding its breath. I walked through the enormous doors of the church, following the strange man from the call who had been waiting for me outside. He was tall, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, his steps deliberate and quick. He said nothing, leading me through narrow, dimly lit corridors that seemed to have no end. The air was thick, and with every step, I could feel the building closing in around me, as though I were walking deeper into something I didn't understand. We passed through corridors lined with statues of saints and angels, their eyes cold and distant. There were no guards, no one else in sight. The silence was suffocating, and the only sound was the soft echo of our footsteps. Eventually, we reached a door at the far end of a long hallway, a door that looked no different from the others, except it wasn't. The man didn't knock, just turned the handle and pushed it open with a creak. The smell that hit me was immediate, musty, like centuries of dust and forgotten history. But there was something else too, something that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. It was almost as if the room was holding its breath, waiting for me. Inside was a dimly lit study, filled with ancient manuscripts and dusty books, but in the center of the room, on a large oak desk, sat a book, not just any book, but one so old it seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Alongside it lay a map, yellowed and fragile, its edges curling as though time itself was trying to erase its existence. I stepped forward instinctively, my heart pounding. The map looked like nothing I had ever seen before. At first, I thought it was another medieval chart, a map of distant lands or ancient trade routes. But as I leaned in closer, I saw something that made my blood run cold. This wasn't a map of kingdoms or empires. It was a map of hell, real, physical, geographical. The edges were inscribed with markings I didn't recognize, symbols in Latin, runes that made my stomach tighten with dread. And at the top of the map was a phrase written in bold, stark letters: "The seventh gate opens." I staggered back, my hand instinctively reaching for the desk to steady myself. This was not a mere artifact. It wasn't just some theological relic to be studied. It was real, a guide, a key to something far darker than anything I had ever studied. The man behind me spoke, his voice low and quiet. "Do you understand, Lucas Moore?" he asked. His eyes, dark and empty, never left mine. "This isn't history. This is a warning." I turned to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is this? What is this, really?" His voice dropped even lower. "The Vatican doesn't just protect history. It controls it. This map, it shows the gates, 7 entry points to hell itself. And you, Lucas Moore, are the one chosen to stop it. The 7th gate is opening, and when it does, nothing will be the same again." I felt the room closing in around me. My mind was reeling. I had spent my life studying history, researching ancient texts, digging into forgotten secrets. But this was beyond anything I had ever prepared for. The man didn't wait for my response. He simply turned and started walking toward the door. "Come," he said. "You don't have time to waste. You've seen it now and you've made your choice." I stood there, frozen, unable to move. My mind was spinning. This couldn't be real, right? Yet, everything about this room, this map, felt real, as if I had just crossed a line I could never return from. Finally, I forced myself to move, to follow him. There was no turning back now. I had been chosen, whether I liked it or not. The basement of Vatican was a place few had seen, and even fewer ever spoke of. It wasn't the grand, hallowed halls that visitors marveled at. No, this was where the oldest and darkest secrets of the church were kept, hidden away beneath layers of stone and history. And it wasn't just ancient manuscripts or forgotten relics that filled this place. It was the very stuff of legends, of darkness and of fear, kept carefully sealed for centuries. I had crossed a threshold now. The map lay in front of me, its ancient parchment trembling under my fingertips. For hours I had been studying the symbols and coordinates, piecing together the story it wanted to tell. Hell, the map claimed, was not some far-off abstract concept. It wasn't a metaphorical place or an allegory. It was real, tangible, and frighteningly close. Each page I turned revealed more. 7 gates, each one marked on the map with precise coordinates. These weren't just theoretical locations or imaginary boundaries. No, each gate had a real place, a physical entrance somewhere in Rome, leading to the hellish depths. The implications of this knowledge made my pulse quicken. These gates were not hidden away in distant lands or mythical realms. They were right here, under our feet. The more I examined the details, the more certain I became. This was no longer just research. The gates were connected to something deeper, something the church had buried beneath centuries of scripture, silence, and fear. The lines on the map were drawn with a meticulous hand, marking exact places where the barriers between the living world and the underworld were thin enough to cross. I traced my finger over one of the coordinates, reading the Latin text beside it. The 7th gate. Open. I froze. The words seemed to pulse on the page as though they were alive, as if calling me. I had spent my life studying the dead, books, manuscripts, histories of people long gone. But this was something beyond my understanding. This was living history, bleeding into the present, the seventh gate. I had to know where it was. But something about it felt like a pull, like it wasn't just information to be recorded, but a door waiting to be opened, even if I wasn't ready. I stood up, pacing around the cramped room, feeling a growing unease tighten in my chest. I had made the choice to step into this dark corner of history. But did I truly understand what I was about to uncover? The map had already made it clear that these gates were not ordinary relics. They were doors to something else, something no one was meant to discover. I had felt it the moment I set foot in the Vatican's secret archives, the weight of a centuries-old curse hanging in the air. Despite the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind, I couldn't stop myself. My curiosity was a force more powerful than the dread that had started to settle in my gut. What was the church hiding? Why were these gates buried in the first place? What was the Vatican trying to protect, and from whom? I opened my phone and checked the map again. The coordinates, written in a precise and ancient script, lined up perfectly with the modern-day street addresses. I clicked on the map, zooming in on the last set of coordinates. It pointed to a location near Piazza Navona. I knew that place well. It was a peaceful square filled with tourists, artists, and cafes. Nothing about it seemed remotely dangerous. But according to this map, the seventh gate lay beneath it, hidden in plain sight. A wave of nausea washed over me. It couldn't be. I had walked through that very square countless times. How could something so dark, so dangerous, lie just beneath my feet? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that somehow this was no longer just research. It had become my destiny to uncover this truth, whether I wanted to or not. But what truth? I knew what I had to do next. I couldn't ignore the pull, no matter how terrifying it was. I had to see it for myself. I had to go to Piazza Navona, to the very spot where the map of hell pointed. But the question kept swirling in my mind. What exactly was I searching for? What was behind that gate? Who had used it before me? As I gathered my things and prepared to leave, I could hear the faint hum of the Vatican's fluorescent lights. The hum seemed to echo in the silence of the basement, filling the space around me. It felt like the walls were closing in, as if I were being trapped in a place that didn't belong to the living anymore. I grabbed my coat and the map, stuffing it into my bag as though it might disappear if I took too long. Before leaving the basement, I paused, standing at the entrance. The air felt thick, suffocating. And then, for the first time since I entered this place, I heard it. A soft whisper, faint and fleeting, like a breath against my ear. "Don't go." I spun around, but the basement was empty. No one was there. But the whisper lingered, echoing in my mind. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the nerves. I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just imagination. This was no ordinary job, no simple research project. The closer I got to the truth, the closer I was to the seven gates, the more I could feel something alive watching me, waiting for me to make the next move. I stepped out of the Vatican and into the cold night air, my mind racing. I was on the edge of something dangerous, something beyond anything I had ever studied. As I walked through the narrow streets of Rome, I couldn't help but feel that I was being drawn toward an inevitable truth, a truth that would change everything. And when I reached Piazza Navona, the atmosphere shifted again. The square was still busy, filled with tourists, the sound of laughter and conversation filling the air. But to me, it felt hollow, a mask hiding something far darker. I walked to the spot where the map had led me, a quiet corner near an old, worn building. It was the perfect place to hide a secret, one so ancient and powerful that it could change the course of history forever. The seventh gate was real, and it was waiting for me. The atmosphere inside the old house near Piazza Navona was nothing like I had imagined. The dusty air felt heavier here, as if the building had been waiting for me. The windows were boarded up, casting shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the walls. The house wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, suffocating me with a presence I couldn't explain. I hesitated at the foot of the staircase leading to the basement. The map had been clear. This was where the seventh gate was supposed to be located, deep below this decaying structure. But the eerie quietness around me made it feel as though I wasn't the first person to be drawn here, nor would I be the last. Something was waiting in the shadows, and it wasn't just a historical discovery. This was dangerous, far more dangerous than I had anticipated. I finally descended into the basement, my footsteps echoing in the stillness, each one feeling like a countdown. The coldness hit me immediately, the kind of cold that sank deep into your bones and never let go. The air was thick with the smell of old stone and something else, something organic and rotten, like the earth itself was clinging to its forgotten past. It was as though the basement was holding on to secrets too dark to be let go. As I ventured further in, I noticed the walls were etched with symbols, not Christian, not ancient Roman. These were something older, something unfathomable. Their twisted shapes made my stomach churn, and I felt as though they were watching me, pulling me deeper into their web. It wasn't just a matter of curiosity anymore. It was a compulsion. I was no longer in control. At the center of the room stood the stone well, its massive opening leading to an abyss. The runes carved into the stone around it were identical to the ones on the map, and I knew this was where the seventh gate was. I felt a strange pull, as if the gate was already calling me, waiting for me to open it. But before I could reach for it, I heard a whisper, faint at first, like the rustling of pages long forgotten. "You shouldn't be here." I froze, every muscle in my body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. The voice had been clear, yet it seemed to come from nowhere. A chill ran down my spine. Had I heard it wrong? I glanced around the room, my heart racing. Then I saw him. A figure stepped out of the shadows, translucent and pale. He was tall, with dark, sunken eyes that seemed to pierce straight into me. His clothes were tattered, his body a ghastly reflection of the decay around him. He looked as if he'd been trapped here for centuries. "You need to leave," the ghost rasped, his voice filled with desperation. "You're not supposed to be here. No one is. We are all trapped." I couldn't speak. I just stared, my mind reeling. Who was he? Why was he here? The ghost moved closer and the air grew colder with each step. "I died here," he said. "Hundreds of years ago I came seeking the truth about the gates, and now I'm bound to this place, to this well. You will be too. You don't understand what you're dealing with." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my mind. The air in the basement felt suffocating, as if it were pressing down on me. The walls seemed to be closing in. This wasn't just about the map. It wasn't just about hell. Something far more dangerous had been set in motion, and I was part of it now. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to ask, my voice shaking. The spirit's eyes widened, and he stepped closer, his figure becoming clearer as if he were manifesting more power the closer he got to me. "There is something else here, something ancient. It has been guarding these gates for longer than you can imagine. It watches everyone who comes here," he whispered, his voice low and frantic. "Those who seek the truth never leave. It's a trap, a curse." I couldn't take my eyes off of him. Something in his voice made me believe every word he said. I had to know more. I had to understand what this ghost was warning me about, even if it cost me everything. "What is it?" I asked again, feeling my voice crack under the weight of his words. "What's waiting for me?" His face twisted with what could have been a grimace, or perhaps it was a twisted grin, though the expression felt more like pain than anything else. "It is not a man. It is not a demon," he said, voice trembling. "It is something older than both. It is the force that keeps the gates open, the force that brings people here, and it doesn't let them go. You've been marked now. It's watching you." I stepped back, suddenly feeling sick to my stomach. My body was trembling, and my breath came out in shallow gasps. The ghost faded back into the shadows, but before he disappeared, he said, "Don't seek the truth. It will only bring you to the same end." And then he was gone. I stood there in the silence, the weight of his warning sinking in. I had thought I was uncovering a lost part of history, but I had stumbled into something far worse, something alive, waiting. I could feel it. The first step down into the darkness was all it took to undo me. The moment my feet hit the cold stone of the basement floor, I felt the air shift around me, thick with the scent of ancient decay and the oppressive weight of something far beyond this world. The house above me felt a distant memory now, as if I had stepped into another realm entirely, one where time had no meaning. The faint flicker of my flashlight barely illuminated the narrow hallway ahead. The walls were lined with ancient runes, their jagged edges clawing into the stone. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the very earth beneath me was sucking me deeper into its secret, into its hunger. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept moving, driven by something darker, something I had long ago accepted as fate. The temperature dropped dramatically, not just a chill from the air, but a sickening coldness that seemed to rise from the very ground. My breath formed clouds before me, and I could feel the hairs on my neck stand up. The closer I got to the entrance of the corridor, the more I felt the vibrations of a presence, as though something was watching, something waiting. I turned the corner and found myself in a narrow passageway. The air was thick with the smell of moss, and the silence was so absolute that my own footsteps sounded like a drumbeat in my ears. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that the darkness was more alive than I could comprehend, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to make the next move. The deeper I went, the more the sensation of being watched intensified. And then, the whispers started. At first it was faint, so faint I thought it might have been my imagination, but the more I walked, the more they grew louder. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakable, pleading, desperate, like a chorus of trapped souls. And then, I saw them. Shadows, moving against the walls, shapes flickering in and out of existence. I thought I might be hallucinating, but when I heard a voice, clear and guttural, I knew this was no delusion. "You shouldn't have come," a voice growled. "This place doesn't let go." I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hand, and there, emerging from the shadows, was a man, his body translucent, flickering like an old television screen with bad reception. His face was pale, sunken, his eyes hollow, yet full of a deep desperation. He reached out to me with both hands, his fingers twitching unnaturally. "You're looking for the truth, aren't you?" he rasped. "We all were. But there's no escape. There never is." I backed away instinctively, my heart pounding. The air felt thick with the weight of his words. My skin prickled with fear, and yet the pull to know more was undeniable. The map, the ghost's warnings, it all led to this moment. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would make this nightmare more real. The man smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was a grimace, a twist of agony. "We were all like you, once, seeking answers. The truth was our downfall. Now we are the keepers of this place, trapped forever, forgotten by time." His words hit me like a weight, trapped forever. The idea was too much to process, but I couldn't look away. He was compelling, almost human, yet so very far from it. Something about him felt old, a presence that had been marked by time, diseased by the past. I swallowed, trying to focus. "What do you mean, trapped? What happens if I keep going?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. I had crossed the line and there was no going back. His face twisted again, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. "The gates. They call to you. The more you search for them, the more you're drawn in. You can't leave once you've crossed the threshold. None of us do." At that moment I felt it. The air shifted again, heavier, colder. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse, and I realized that the sound of footsteps had changed. Someone, or something, was following me. I turned sharply, flashlight trembling in my grip. There, in the distance, I saw the faint glow of firelight, flickering like a distant hellish flame. I wasn't alone. Suddenly the whispers grew louder, more frantic. There was a shift in the air, and I knew that I had crossed over, not just physically, but into something far darker, a place that would never let me leave. I couldn't turn back now. I had come too far. The truth, whatever it was was waiting for me. But as I moved toward the flames, I couldn't shake the feeling that this journey would cost me everything. The ground shook beneath my feet as I made my way toward the tower at the center of hell. The air was suffocating, thick with a heat that seemed to seep into my skin, my clothes sticking to my body. The once cool atmosphere of the underground had been replaced by something far more oppressive, a smothering force that squeezed the breath from my lungs. I had come here seeking truth, and now I was starting to realize that I had stepped into something far darker, far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The creatures I had encountered, the souls that had pleaded for help, they were nothing compared to what awaited me now. The true horror of the gates had yet to reveal itself. The tower loomed above me, its walls dark and blackened by time. It was massive, unlike anything I had ever seen. The air around it vibrated, almost as if it were alive. There was no way to describe it. It wasn't just stone. It felt like a living entity, pulsating with dark energy. As I neared the entrance, I could feel the weight of it pressing on me, almost forcing me to turn back. The air was thick, as though the tower itself was a gatekeeper, refusing to let me pass. I reached the base and looked up. A single enormous door stood at the entrance, crafted from obsidian and covered in intricate symbols, the same symbols that I had seen etched into the walls of the labyrinth. The symbols were not merely decorative, they were part of something far more dangerous, far more ancient. A voice, low and gravelly, broke the silence. "You should have stayed away." I turned around, and there he stood, the guardian. The creature that had kept the gates closed for centuries. It towered over me, its skin a mixture of molten metal and dark shadows. Its eyes were black, burning with a fire that seemed to pierce right through me. Its presence filled the air, and I could feel my heart race. I was no longer in control. It had always been this way. Since the moment I had set foot in the basement of the Vatican, I had been drawn here, lured by forces beyond my comprehension. And now, standing before this creature, I understood. The Vatican had not just been guarding these gates. They had been using them, manipulating them, pulling from them something that could reshape the world, and I was the one who had opened the door. The creature stepped closer, its eyes locking onto mine. "You've come far, human. Too far." I stepped back, heart pounding. "Why?" I demanded, my voice shaky. "Why have you allowed this? Why keep the gates open?" The creature chuckled, a sound that rumbled deep in its chest, like an avalanche slowly rolling toward its inevitable destination. "The Vatican is not what you think," it said. "They don't just protect these gates, they use them. The gates are more than just a prison for souls. They are a source of power, a tool to control the flow of life and death. The Church has kept the balance, but it is not the balance of life. It is a balance of control." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The Vatican had known this all along. They had used the gates to manipulate power, to keep the world in check. I had thought I was uncovering some long-forgotten secret of history, but the truth was far darker. The Vatican wasn't just hiding knowledge, they were guarding a weapon. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, its molten skin radiating an unbearable heat as it spoke again, its voice like fire scraping stone. "You think you are different. You think you've come to save the world from what lies beneath, but you are not the first. Many have come before you, drawn by the gates, and like them, you will not leave. None of us leave." My breath caught in my throat. The weight of its words sunk into me. I had been warned time and again that the gates were not meant to be opened. The souls had pleaded with me. The creature had warned me. But I had ignored them all. Now I stood before the truth, and the price was clear. I took a step forward, defiance boiling inside me despite the fear. "I won't let you control this anymore. I will close the gates." The creature's eyes narrowed. It took a deep breath, and the ground beneath me trembled. "You think you can control what you've unleashed?" it sneered. "You are too weak. You cannot close what has been opened. You have chosen your path, Lucas Moore, and now you must face the consequences." The tower behind it shuddered, and I realized something far worse was unfolding. The gates weren't just opening. They were already alive, breathing, pulling something toward them. "You want to stop this?" You will pay the price. The world around me began to shift, the space warping like a living entity reacting to the creature's words. The gates were open, and there was no turning back. The power I had unleashed was now out of my control. I had come here for answers, but now I had learned the truth. The gates of hell were not something to be unlocked, but something to be kept sealed forever. The creature raised its hand, and I felt the air crackle with energy. I realized in that moment that I had crossed a line. There was no escape, no way out of the prison I had entered. The price of knowledge was more than I could bear, and the price of shutting the gates would cost me something far more than my soul. The tower loomed before me, towering like an ancient dark sentinel. The air surrounding it was thick, oppressive, the atmosphere charged with something far darker than any natural force. Each step I took felt heavier, as if the very ground beneath me was pressing down, urging me to stop and turn back. But there was no turning back now. I had come too far, and I could feel that I was standing at the crossroads of fate. The gates were not simply doors, they were living, pulsating with a power beyond comprehension. And I, Lucas Moore, was the one who had unlocked them. I was the one who had unleashed this horror. Now, standing before them, I realized that the price for knowledge, for seeking the truth, was something far greater than I had ever imagined. The creature, the guardian of the gates, stood before me, its molten eyes glowing with an intensity that made the air shimmer around us. It was not just a being of hellfire. It was the embodiment of hell itself, watching, waiting for me to make my choice. "You've come far, Lucas Moore," the creature's voice boomed, deep and rumbling like an ancient storm. "But now you must pay the price." My heart raced, my body tense with fear and uncertainty. The weight of its words was suffocating. What was the price? I had already given so much, my peace of mind, my sense of reality. But now I understood that the cost was far greater than I had ever anticipated. The creature's eyes narrowed as it took a step forward, its molten form flickering with dark energy. "The gates are open. Hell has already begun to rise." Its voice was like a death knell. "You can destroy the gates, close them forever, but in doing so, you will sacrifice yourself. You will become one of us, trapped here forever. You will be the new guardian, bound to this place for eternity." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sacrifice myself? The idea of being bound here forever, of losing everything, my life, my humanity, was more than I could bear. I had come here to seek answers, but I had unleashed something far worse. Closing the gates meant condemning myself to an eternal prison, becoming part of the very darkness I had hoped to stop. "What happens if I don't close the gates?" I asked, my voice hoarse, betraying the fear that gripped me. The creature smiled, a cruel twist of molten skin. "Then hell will rise, Lucas Moore. You will be free. But at what cost? The world above will burn, the chaos will flood through, and humanity will fall. Your choice will determine the fate of everyone." I stepped back, my mind reeling. The words spun in my head like a whirlwind. How could I make a choice between the world above and my own soul? The very thought of hell rising, of the gates being open to the world, sent a chill down my spine. But the thought of becoming a prisoner in this dark place, guarding the gates for eternity, was something I could not bear either. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me, the urgency growing. My body felt as if it were being drawn into the gates, as if they were calling to me, waiting for me to decide. But even then, I knew that no matter what I chose, I would never be the same. My life, my soul, had been forever altered by this journey. I had seen things I couldn't forget, learned truths that could never be erased. I looked at the gates, feeling the power and danger radiating from them. There was no going back. Whatever I did, the world would change forever. The only question was whether I would be the one to seal the gates, or whether I would let them tear the world apart. "I will do it," I said, my voice steady but filled with the weight of the choice. "I will close the gates. I will sacrifice myself to keep hell from breaking through." The creature's molten eyes glowed with a mix of approval and contempt, and the ground beneath me trembled. It stepped aside, allowing me to approach the gates. The darkness that surrounded them seemed to pulse with power, the air thick with the stench of hellfire. It was as if the gates were alive, waiting for me to make my choice. "So be it," the creature said, its voice cold. "You will be the guardian now. You will never leave. The gates will be sealed, and the world above will remain safe. But you will become part of this place, forever." I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my body trembling with the weight of the decision. As I approached the gates, I could feel the dark energy growing stronger, pulling at me. My body fought against it, but my will was stronger. I had made my choice. The gates began to shudder, the power flowing through them growing more intense with every step I took. I reached out, my hand shaking as I touched the cold, black stone. The moment my fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through me, and I felt the weight of eternity settle upon me. My body began to change, becoming one with the gates. I was no longer Lucas Moore. I could feel the power of the gates wrapping around me, binding me to them, turning me into a guardian of this dark place. My body began to dissolve, replaced by a strange, cold energy that coursed through me, freezing me in time. I was becoming something else, something eternal, a part of the gates that would never be able to leave. I could feel my humanity slipping away, replaced by something darker, something older. The creature's voice echoed in my mind. "You will never leave. You will never escape. You are the guardian now. Your life is over. Your soul is bound here forever, but you have saved the world above. Hell will not rise again, not on your watch." The gates closed behind me with a deafening roar, sealing me in this dark, oppressive place. I could feel the power of hell pressing against me, but I was no longer afraid. I had made my choice, and with that choice, I had saved humanity.